3:17 a.m. Moscow time, Sheremetyevo Airport. 4 runways, 0 clearances. On radar screens, a single blip appears. Speed, under 120 miles per hour. Cost, a few $100s. Impact, national shutdown. Within seconds, plan cover activates. Airspace sealed, runways locked. Missile batteries roll into airport parking lots. Above Moscow, more than 180 civilian aircraft circle. Fuel margins drop below 45 minutes. Pilots request emergency landing priority. Air traffic control answers with one phrase: runway closed. On the ground, tens of thousands of passengers freeze in terminals. Flights canceled, connections erased, schedules collapse. This is not a drill. This is not an exercise. According to aviation data reviewed by international analysts, Russian flight disruptions doubled in 2025. By early 2026, delays are no longer spikes. They are the system. 1 drone, 3 major Moscow airports, total paralysis. At the same moment, insurance rates spike. Airline losses climb into the billions of rubles. Ticket prices jump by over 30% in a single year. And this is only the visible layer. Behind the locked runways sits a deeper crisis. A shrinking fleet, missing parts, aviation systems frozen by sanctions, planes kept airborne by dismantling other planes. Industry insiders call it cannibalization, economists call it unsustainable, security officials call it a nightmare. By 2030, more than 30% of Russia's civilian aircraft are projected to be grounded permanently, based on current attrition rates and maintenance data. The Kremlin insists everything is under control. State television shows planes taking off. Propaganda shows smiling crews. But above Moscow, pilots circle. Fuel ticks down. And then the unthinkable happens. What is collapsing in Russia's skies is not an accident. It is the result of layered pressure. Military, economic, technological, psychological. At the center stands Russia versus Ukraine, but the battlefield is no longer only trenches and front lines. It is airspace, it is logistics, it is civilian infrastructure. Russia operates the world's largest country by landmass, 11 time zones, more than 9 million square miles. For this geography, aviation is not a luxury. It is the glue holding the economy together. Before 2022, Russia's civilian fleet relied heavily on Boeing and Airbus. Roughly 70% of its commercial aircraft were Western-made or Western-supported. Engines, avionics, navigation software, all interconnected. Then, after the Ukraine invasion, the United States, the EU, and allies cut off aircraft sales, spare parts, software updates, and certified maintenance channels. What followed was not an immediate crash. It was something worse: slow decay. Planes kept flying, but every flight burned irreplaceable parts. By 2024, Russian airlines began dismantling parked aircraft to keep others operational. One hydraulic pump removed here, one flight computer taken there. This practice, known across aviation as cannibalization, is normally a short-term emergency measure. In Russia, it became policy. Meanwhile, Ukraine adapted. Cheap drones, some costing $300 to $1,000, began probing deep into Russian territory, not to destroy airports, but to interrupt them. Each appearance triggers Plan Covert, the Soviet-era carpet protocol. Airspace closes instantly, no distinction between threat and civilian traffic. The contrast is clear. Ukraine uses low-cost systems to force shutdowns worth millions per hour. Russia counters with expensive air defense units placed next to terminals. A few $100s versus multi-million-dollar missiles. Asymmetric pressure at its purest. The political stakes are enormous. Civil aviation is prestige. It signals modernity, stability, control. For the Kremlin, grounded planes signal weakness. For the public, they signal risk. By late 2025, leaked industry data showed flight delays had doubled year on year. By early 2026, entire days of operations vanished from Moscow's airports. This is not only about machines, it is about confidence. When citizens hesitate to board flights, economic activity slows. Business trips vanish. Regional connectivity fractures. A superpower built on speed and scale now moves at the pace of rail timetables from another century. And this is only the foundation, because once pressure begins, escalation follows. The escalation did not arrive in one strike. It arrived in waves. First came isolated shutdowns. One airport, one drone, one night. Operations resumed by morning. Then, patterns emerged. By mid-2025, Ukrainian drones began appearing daily near Moscow's airspace. Not swarms, singles, enough to trigger alarms, enough to force closures. Each incident followed the same chain reaction. Radar contact, air defense alert, plan cover activated. Within 90 seconds, all arrivals halted, departures frozen, aircraft already airborne diverted or forced to circle. Pilots reported holding patterns lasting 40 to 70 minutes. Fuel calculations tightened. Alternate airports lay hundreds of miles away. Then came the first twist. Russia responded by blanketing Moscow with GPS jamming. The goal was simple: blind the drones. But the effect spread wider. Civilian aircraft lost satellite navigation. Cockpit displays drifted. Approach paths shifted miles off course. By late 2025, Russian pilots quietly reverted to visual landing procedures in congested airspace, a method designed for clear skies, not for megacities. The second twist followed fast. Air traffic controllers now faced conflicting data. Radar lagged, GPS feeds stuttered, communications overlapped. On busy mornings, more than 200 aircraft operated simultaneously above Moscow's air corridors, according to leaked aviation logs reviewed by analysts. Every closure multiplied risk. When one runway shuts, congestion doubles. When three shut, chaos rules. Then came the third twist. Ukraine did not need to escalate damage, only timing. Drones appeared during peak hours, early morning business waves, evening return surges. Each closure erased entire schedules. Crews timed out. Aircraft stranded at secondary airports with no spare parts. Passengers slept on terminal floors. Luggage piled up unclaimed. Customer service desks vanished behind security barriers. Behind the scenes, airlines hemorrhaged cash. Every diverted flight cost tens of thousands of dollars in fuel, crew hours, and compensation. Multiply that by hundreds per week. By early 2026, internal airline estimates showed monthly losses exceeding 20 billion rubles across major carriers. The Kremlin tried counterpressure. Air defense systems moved closer. Some were placed directly beside terminal buildings. Travelers saw missile launchers where jet bridges once dominated the view. The message was meant to reassure. It did the opposite. Ticket demand dropped sharply on domestic routes. Business travelers shifted to rail. Families postponed trips. Then the escalation crossed a psychological line. Audio recordings surfaced. Pilots requesting immediate landing priority due to low fuel margins. Controllers refusing due to airspace restrictions. In several cases, aircraft diverted to remote airfields lacking proper passenger handling facilities. No buses, no customs staff, no clear onward transport. The sky had become unpredictable. At the same time, maintenance pressure peaked. With sanctioned parts unavailable, engineers swapped components across fleets. One plane grounded to keep two flying, then two grounded to keep one airborne. Aircraft utilization rates spiked past safe norms. Some jets flew 30 to 40% more hours per month than pre-2022 averages, according to aviation specialists monitoring Russian fleets. This was not resilience, it was exhaustion. Each drone sighting added stress. Each shutdown tightened margins. Each delay eroded trust. The escalation was not explosive, it was suffocating. And by early 2026, one reality became unavoidable. Russia's airspace was no longer a controlled domain. It was a contested zone. And the consequences were about to ripple far beyond the runway. The strategic impact spreads far beyond aviation. What begins on runways ends in the economy. Civil aviation is a multiplier sector. When it slows, everything slows. By early 2026, Russia's domestic air traffic volume had fallen by an estimated 25 to 30% compared to pre-2022 levels, according to industry assessments cited by international analysts. That decline is not absorbed evenly. Remote regions suffer first: Siberia, the Far East, northern industrial hubs. Flights there are not convenience, they are lifelines. When routes disappear, supply chains stretch, medical logistics lag, skilled workers hesitate to relocate. Economically, the numbers stack up fast. Major carriers face soaring insurance premiums. Risk surcharges alone rose by more than 40% between 2024 and 2026. Fuel inefficiencies add millions per month as aircraft circle or divert. Compensation payouts surge. According to estimates referenced by Reuters and aviation consultancies, Russia's airline sector required hundreds of billions of rubles in state support between 2022 and 2025 just to remain operational. In the 2026 federal budget, those subsidies were cut sharply as defense spending took priority. That decision triggered a cascade. Routes were trimmed, frequencies reduced, entire regional connections vanished. Airports that once handled dozens of daily flights now see only a handful. Some sit nearly idle. Social effects follow quickly. For the middle class, flying becomes rare. For smaller cities, isolation deepens. Ticket prices climbed sharply. On some domestic routes, fares rose by 50% or more compared to 2021 averages. Rail cannot absorb the load. Road infrastructure cannot replace speed. Military consequences appear next. Civil aviation shares airspace, radar coverage, and personnel pipelines with military systems. When civilian control degrades, situational awareness suffers. Reports from Defense News and Jane's assessments indicate that constant airspace closures complicate military logistics flights as well, forcing reroutes and schedule disruptions. Training hours shrink, readiness suffers. At the same time, personnel strain grows. Pilots face rising stress. Controllers work under emergency conditions daily. Maintenance crews operate without certified supply chains. Fatigue accumulates. Strategically, this is attrition warfare without explosions. Ukraine applies pressure not by destroying fleets, but by forcing Russia to expend resources defending civilian space. Every drone sighting consumes manpower, fuel, and attention. The cost exchange is brutal. A drone worth under $1,000 can freeze operations costing millions per hour. Air defense systems worth tens of millions sit idle, guarding terminals instead of front line. This imbalance drains resilience. Financial markets notice. Russian aviation firms trade at depressed valuations. Foreign leasing companies write off assets. Domestic insurers tighten coverage. The system narrows. By 2030, projections showing over 30% of the fleet grounded no longer read as forecasts. They read as momentum. And when aviation falters at this scale, it signals something deeper. Loss of technological access, loss of integration, loss of strategic mobility. The skies are not just emptying, they are becoming borders. And beyond those borders lies the global response. The ripple does not stop at Russia's borders. It widens, fast. NATO watches closely. Not because of planes, but because of doctrine. What is unfolding over Moscow is a case study in modern pressure warfare. Ukraine's approach mirrors trends seen across NATO exercises since 2023. Cheap systems, high frequency, psychological dominance. A drone costing less than a household appliance forces shutdowns that disrupt a capital city. This lesson is not lost on planners in Washington, Brussels, or Warsaw. For the United States, the implications are strategic. Civil infrastructure is now a front line. Airports, ports, energy nodes. Defense analysts cited by major outlets note that Russia's experience reinforces a core US doctrine shift. Resilience matters more than platform count. Control matters more than firepower. China studies the same footage. Beijing sees how sanctions compound battlefield pressure, how access denial to components slowly erodes entire sectors. Aviation, semiconductors, logistics. For China's planners, Russia is a live experiment in what happens when a major power loses integration with Western supply chains. Europe feels it directly. The EU rerouted air traffic years ago to avoid Russian airspace. Now, instability inside Russia raises new concerns. Insurance markets tighten. Overflight risk calculations shift. Eastern European states reinforce air defenses not just for military reasons, but to protect civilian nodes. Airports are no longer neutral. In the Middle East, energy exporters watch transport fragility closely. Russia's weakened internal mobility complicates oil logistics, refinery staffing, maintenance rotations, export scheduling. Global markets react subtly but consistently. Delays increase volatility. Uncertainty adds premiums. Isolation compounds cost. Military comparisons sharpen the lesson. A single advanced fighter jet costs over $80 million. A long-range interceptor missile can exceed $3 million per launch. A drone that forces a shutdown may cost 1/1000th of that. This is the new arithmetic of conflict. Experts project several scenarios over the next 3 to 6 months. In the first, Russia adapts partially, more air defenses, more jamming, but higher civilian disruption. In the second, pressure intensifies, drone frequency rises, civil aviation shrinks faster than planned. In the third, the Kremlin prioritizes military airspace fully, accepting civilian decline as collateral damage. None of these restore pre-2022 normality. For allies, the takeaway is blunt. Control. For Russia, the message is harsher. The skies reflect the system beneath them. And right now, that system is under strain from every direction. The world is watching, not for a single breaking moment, but for how long the pressure can be absorbed. And that question leads to the final reckoning. What began as a technical inconvenience has become a strategic warning. Russia's aviation crisis is no longer about delayed flights or crowded terminals. It is about control, capability, credibility. The facts now align. A fleet shrinking toward 30% grounded by 2030. Airspace closures triggered by objects costing less than a smartphone. Airlines losing tens of billions of rubles per month. Subsidies cut as defense spending surges. Passengers priced out. Regions isolated. Every layer reinforces the same conclusion. This is systemic pressure. Western sanctions cut the arteries. Ukrainian drones apply the squeeze. Infrastructure absorbs the shock. The Kremlin insists resilience, but resilience requires replacement. Replacement requires access. Access is gone. Aviation once symbolized Russia's modern reach. Now it exposes fragility. Pilots circle longer, controllers work blind, airports resemble fortified zones. The sky, once a promise of speed, now signals risk. Strategically, this matters far beyond travel. When a country struggles to move people, it struggles to move ideas, labor, capital, and power. Mobility underpins economic growth. It underpins military logistics. It underpins unity. History shows empires do not falter only at the front lines. They weaken when systems fail quietly, when networks thin, when trust erodes. So the questions sharpen. Can Russia stabilize civilian aviation under permanent pressure? Can sanctions and asymmetric tactics force deeper economic contraction without escalation? Will the Kremlin accept a smaller sky to sustain the war effort? Or will internal strain reshape priorities faster than expected? The next 3 to 6 months will be critical, not for dramatic collapse, but for cumulative damage. Because modern conflict is not always loud. Sometimes it hums, like engines circling with no runway. Now the conversation turns outward. What does this aviation crisis reveal about the future of high-cost militaries facing low-cost disruption? How vulnerable are other nations' civilian systems to similar pressure? And how long can a major power operate while slowly disconnecting from the world above it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this analysis, subscribe for deeper breakdowns as this story evolves. The sky tells the truth before headlines